conversation with Prime Minister P.J. Patterson.
Okay, thanks very much. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Hello? I'm sorry. I'm so confused I forgot to press the button. Hello?
Good afternoon, Perkins.
Good afternoon to you all. Yes. Okay. I hope that isn't a sign of things to come.
Hello?
Hello. Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, Mr. Perkins. How are you?
Very well, thank you. May I welcome you to Straight Talk and
Thank you.
take this opportunity of wishing you the best for 1995.
The very same to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Prime Minister, you've been involved in and prominent in the political life of this country now for 40 or more years. You were a strategist and organizer for the People's National Party as early as the 1950s. Ministers.
I came into the party as an organizer right after we lost the federal elections in 1957 and became involved in working towards the victory in 1959. And I've been involved in all campaigns since, even those where we have ended on the losing side.
Yes, well, those haven't been all that many.
Well, I hope there would have been none at all, but that's how the democratic wheel turns.
Yes. Okay, you've been minister since you weren't minister in 1972, between 1972 and 1980, part of the time Deputy Prime Minister, minister again after 1989, and now Prime Minister. You said you are well steeped in the political process of this country, well experienced.
I would think that's fair comment.
Yes. You recently described this political process as a fight for scarce benefits and political spoils, which has contributed to a polarized society in which we operate as hostile tribes, which seem to be perpetually at war, rather than working together to realize a common goal. That sounds...
I did say that, but I think it's important to speak about the context in which that was put.
Yes.
It was at the opening of the Values and Attitudes conference in February of last year, and I was speaking about the changes in values, norms, and modes of behavior to which Professor Stone had written earlier. I then said the fight for scarce and political spoils has contributed to a polarized society, but I want to make it very clear that I was not saying that that is what politics is about. In fact, I have been at length to say time and time again that politicians have to be involved in leading the process of community building, and we should not confine ourselves simply to the distribution of benefits.
Yes, Prime Minister, I wasn't... The point I'm making is that this is the description of the political process, not as it ought to be, but a description of it as it is.
Too much of focus right now on the distribution of spoils.
But it sounds to me more importantly, Prime Minister, as if what you're describing is a political process that is corrupt.
I would say that the political process is in need of reform and is capable of improvement, and we always have to be working together to see how we can achieve this. One of the deliberate decisions which I took on acceding to this office was that I was going to do everything in my power to reduce the level of polarization that had bedeviled the political process so far. And my strategy to move away from the path of confrontation into the path of consultation is not by accident, although it has been misunderstood by many people.
But you're not answering my question, Prime Minister. My question is whether what you are describing is not a corrupt political process, a process that divides the country rather than unites it, a country in which the political parties are operating as hostile tribes at war, and in which they're fighting over the spoils of office, which is public resources.
I would not describe the system as being corrupt. I would accept that the system is in urgent need of improvement, and we have to work to secure that. And we can do it in a variety of fields, some of which I have already identified.
Would you agree then, Prime Minister, that if politics has been perverted into a fight for scarce benefits and political spoils, that is corruption?
I wouldn't say so. I would say that politics is about more than the distribution of spoils.
Yes.
I would say that unfortunately in our society, there has been a tendency to concentrate on this element without a sufficient appreciation that there are other things in which the political process must lead. I am not saying that the political system has been confined simply to the distribution of spoil. I have said it has been too dominant an element and it ought to be removed altogether.
But to the extent that it dominates is a dominant element, and to the extent that the political parties are behaving like hostile tribes, perpetually at war,
that is distinctly undesirable, and we have to work together to eradicate that.
Okay. One of your members, Mr. Sam Lawrence, speaking recently in the Public Accounts Committee, referred to something that fits in under this rubric. The tendency to award contracts to people who are not qualified for those contracts. He said that people are given roads to make who had only troopers, pretty trooper. They didn't have road layers, they didn't have rollers, they had no qualifications for the job. And that when the money had been spent, the public was no better off.
Mr. Perkins, it might surprise you to know that not only do I agree entirely with those observations,
yes,
but I had taken positive action to correct it. That is why some months ago, I set up a group of senior people within the administrative structure and working with the contractor general to look at the whole system of the awards of contracts, because I am not satisfied with how it has been working. Perhaps I should point out something here. The cabinet is involved in the final stage for the approval of contracts, but politicians are not involved or ought not to be involved in the award of contracts. We have a contract awards committee that consists entirely of administrative persons and persons who are civil servants. It is they who make a recommendation through the ministries involved to the cabinet, which the cabinet approves. But I think that the criteria which they have been using are entirely wrong. They tend to focus primarily on the question of what is the lowest tender. I think there are other factors that have to be taken into account. What is the performance record of the particular company? What is its competence to undertake a number of simultaneous contracts all at the same time? What is their managerial and supervisory technical expertise? To what extent are they suited to work in the particular area? What is the machinery to which they have access? And in particular, what is the time frame within which they can complete the particular contract? Because I think we have to accept that overruns cost money. Now,
the Auditor General has been talking about that, Prime Minister. He has been saying that contracts are awarded on one basis, and the basis of the award changed, and the money paid for the contract inflated out of all proportion to the original. And
I'm saying, Mr. Perkins,
yes,
if that is so, it is something for which the administrative and technical sides are involved and responsible. It is not something that is attributable to the political directorate. Now, what I think we need to do is to have some overseeing competence to ensure that that doesn't happen. And I think we are going to need to bring in people from the private sector working with the Contractor General Department so that there can be a better supervision of contracts and that certification comes from appropriate persons before any
Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
I think you have
Prime Minister. Could you tell me one thing?
Yes?
Are you saying that after all these years' involvement in the politics of this country, you don't know that when the PNP is in power, favors tend to go to PNP people, contracts tend to go to PNP people, people like Mr. Danai Williams, who is involved in a case accused of defrauding the government.
Can we take the Mr. Danai Williams case as one in point?
Yes.
The cabinet approved of no contract to Mr. Danai Williams.
But Mr. Williams gets a contract nonetheless.
Just a minute. A contract was awarded to the Surrey Construction Company.
Yes.
that company, without any necessity to seek the approval of the ministry,
Yes.
did a subcontract with Mr. Danai Williams. Now, that is the sort of thing with which I think there needs to be greater control. In other words, there should be something that is written into the contract that says before any subcontract can be made, there ought to be the requisite approval sought and obtained from the executing agency. That is one of the areas in which we want to improve the efficiency in the contract system.
Yes, sir, but you're talking about the future. I'm talking about the present and the past. You're talking about how things ought to work. I'm talking about how they do work.
I am saying that the Cabinet and the Ministry of Construction awarded no contract to Mr. Danai Williams. At present, the system permits a subcontract to be awarded to him, and because we recognize that to be a weakness, we are taking positive steps to prevent its recurrence.
So what you're saying then, Prime Minister, is that the politicians are innocent. These things are happening merely because...
I would say
Why?
without qualification or without any modification to that statement, we are accused of many things for which we are not directly responsible.
Are you accused of anything for which you are responsible?
I would say, Mr. Perkins, that there are many areas in which the political directorate needs to be more active, needs to be more vigilant. But one of the things that you have to understand is that we come from a background where traditionally the approach has been that the political directorate is responsible for policy and the administrative apparatus for the implementation of that policy. And I think we're going to have to revisit that as a matter of...
Is that how things have worked over the last 40 years that you've been involved in politics in this country?
That is the theory against which we work. There are several occasions where to get things done, members of the political directorate have to be involved in ensuring implementation, otherwise they simply don't occur. Let me give an example. Right now, I have on my desk a letter from the principal of KLAS saying that in respect of a contract which is funded by the European Union for the building of hostels for students at KLAS, there has been some delinquency on the part of the contractor. Let me say here that that contract was awarded after international competitive tendering, and that particular firm won the contract. The principal has written to me to say, however, that in a number of areas, the contractor is not performing satisfactorily. And he ends by saying he is requesting my assistance in getting some sense of urgency in the contractor's operations to see the project through to completion. Now, in the classic Westminster model, that sort of request would never require the attention of the Prime Minister.
Is the contractor a member of your party, Prime Minister? Is that why it is happening?
I don't know who the contractor is.
I see.
I frankly don't know. It was as a result of international competitive tendering. It was not an award by the government of Jamaica. It would be something in which all nationals of European Union countries were entitled to bid.
So you'd say that it is a matter of misunderstanding the role of the politicians, why people have the present attitude, the cynical attitude towards
I
politics.
think we are wrongfully blamed for a number of things for
Yes.
which we are not responsible.
And why the polls and the recent election results are showing that there is a disaffected body of persons out there, probably as large as 60% or more of the electorate, who have lost faith in the political process.
I would say that that must be a contributing factor, but it is not by any means the only factor. I think we have to recognize that we live in a changing world with a new society that is far more self-confident and that is much better informed about at every level how it needs to function. And in particular, people are demanding a piece of the action for themselves, and they want to run things, and they don't want to leave decisions affecting their daily lives to government or private sector bureaucracy.
Prime Minister, could I ask you to hold for half a minute?
Fine.
This month end, Crichton Brothers has...
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Back with you, sir.
Thank you. If I may just complete the point at which we left.
Yes.
I would say that this sense of disenchantment is not peculiar to Jamaica. It's happening throughout the world, including all the long-established democracies. In the United States, for example, in the last midterm elections, the voter turnout was less than 37%.
Quite true, Prime Minister.
And I think we have to look at some of the factors which are responsible.
But that is not typical for American midterm elections.
Well, I think I should point out that here, no elections are on the horizon, and it's not therefore surprising to find that the level of interest in politics is not as high as it has been at other times.
Well, the interest in politics was not in high at the time of the 1993 election as it was at other times.
Oh, it isn't. And I should say this, that for those who are committed to the democratic process, as I am, any diminution of interest in the political process has to be a cause for concern. And I think it is the business of those of us who are in political leadership to try and see what we can do to correct that.
But, Prime Minister...
My own analysis, if I may be allowed to complete, is that as there are growing aspirations to individual fulfillment, we require stronger social framework and an even stronger social consensus if we are to hold things together. And this is why I feel that we now have to embark on a process of political renewal and political rejuvenation, not only of people, but also of ideas.
Okay, Prime Minister, isn't it odd that all our politicians talk about commitment to the democratic process, and yet the reality of Jamaican political life is that our elections are as corrupt and getting more corrupt, it seems, every time?
Let me speak at two levels, Mr. Perkins.
Yes.
Let me speak, first of all, personally, and let me speak as Prime Minister and leader of the People's National Party. Insofar as my own election contests are concerned, my record is second to none. Indeed, in 1980, I lost my seat when various efforts were made to contrive things in my constituency that would result in violence or in any form of manipulation of the results. They were stoutly and successfully resisted.
But, Prime Minister, that's not an answer to any question.
Oh, please, I'm coming, please.
The fact of the matter is that violence is part of the electoral...
My commitment of fair, free, and honest election cannot be called into question. Now let me turn to my responsibilities.
But that cannot be true, Prime Minister, merely on the basis of an experience in Westmoreland. Hold on, sir. You are the Prime Minister of Jamaica.
Please,
and if you have
at two levels, Mr.
If you have a commitment to free, fair, and honest elections,
must be allowed to proceed to the second level.
Okay, go ahead.
I am not confining my remarks to Eastern Westmoreland.
Okay.
I am speaking firstly of my own practice, and then I now move to my responsibilities as leaders. I have been very much at the heart of the process that sought to reform our electoral system in the 1970s by the establishment of an electoral advisory committee.
Is that true?
Some of the things which we committed ourselves to do were not done in the 1980s and still have not been done. On becoming the leader of the People's National Party and being elected Prime Minister, I set out very, very clearly our intention to complete the process of electoral reform. And I am committed to an electoral system that is free, that is transparent, and that allows the democratic will of the people to be expressed.
When will we have such a system in place?
The Electoral Advisory Committee has been considering the improvements that can be made short term. Those have already been accepted by the government and are being implemented. It is then looking at the medium term and in particular as to whether an electronic voting system is the answer. we await their recommendations because as a result of the decision we have taken, it is not a matter for unilateral action by the government. It is a matter for the Electoral Advisory Committee, and I have said time and time again, whenever they make their recommendations, whatever those recommendations are, this government, as long as I preside over it, will implement those decisions speedily.
You know, Prime Minister, a large part of our problem in this country is the hiatus that so often exists between what our politicians say and what happens or what they do.
Nobody is more impatient than I am, Mr. Perkins, about the delays which are caused between the period of conceptualizing something and the period of implementation.
No, sir, not the
I think
delays.
we have got to do much better.
It's not the delays, it's the contradictions.
That's
It's the, you know, we say one thing and then something else
We
happens.
take too long to implement it. And I think it's, I don't want to say it's a soon-come mentality which prevails throughout the country. I want to say we need to have a greater sense of immediacy and urgency.
Prime Minister, it seems a little odd to some of us that when you had the opportunity recently of appointing a president of the Court of Appeal, you chose someone directly out of this process of a fight for scarce benefits and political spoils carried on by hostile tribes. You chose somebody from who had actively participated in one of those in that hostility to make president of the Court of Appeal. Is this not politicizing the court?
Well, I don't think so, Mr. Perkins. I know you have very strong views on the matter, and so do I. And I just make two observations. One, it is a part of the parliamentary and judicial culture of the Commonwealth of which Jamaica is a part that people have been able to move from political office to the highest judicial office. And there's precedent for that throughout many Commonwealth countries, which I need not repeat here.
Are we comparing eggs to
In the
eggs?
case of the individual, let me get to it directly. He was appointed not because of political connections. He was appointed because, in my judgment, and I have the constitutional responsibility to do so, he was the person most capable, with the erudition, the experience, the integrity, and the imagination, the judicial imagination, which is required to provide leadership in our appellate court at this time.
Okay, Mr. Prime Minister.
And I think his performance since his appointment has vindicated my decision.
Prime Minister, you were a member of an inner cabinet group that monitored the issue of whether a state of emergency was to be declared in 1976.
That's correct.
Yeah. Mr. Rattray was a member of that inner cabinet.
I think so.
Yes.
I think so. I'm prepared to accept that.
We have it on the authority of Mr. Manley that when the decision was taken to declare a state of emergency on the Saturday, the 19th of June, that the reason for doing it on that day had to do with the fear of a Russian ship type story being put out by the Labour Party. And that the power to declare a state of emergency was used to anticipate that announcement being put out by the Labour Party. Was that a proper use of governmental power? Was it an abuse of power? And if it was an abuse of power, was it an abuse in which Mr. Rattray took part for partisan reasons? And would it be right to have such a person as President of the Court of Appeal?
Let me say this. The decision to declare a state of emergency was based on the recommendation of the leaders of the security forces at that time and the intelligence available to them. The government took a decision to act in accordance with their recommendation. The discussions by the Cabinet Subcommittee were related to the exact timing. Should it be on the weekend or should it be during the course of the week that was approaching? On the basis of discussions with the leaders of the security was taken that it ought to be declared on the Saturday, and the declaration was made accordingly.
So if Mr. Manley said what I said he said, he's lying.
I am telling you my recollection of what transpired and the circumstances in which the decision came to be made.
And you are saying that if Mr. Manley said that what I said he said, he's not speaking the truth.
I am saying that my recollection of what transpired is the best of my memory and is an accurate recollection.
Okay, so may I ask you to hold for him? Thank you very much. We're back here with you, Prime Minister. Hello?
Yes, I'm with you.
Shortly before Mr. Rattray was made President of the Court of Appeal, he signed an order for a man to be extradited from Jamaica, a man named Morrison. The man came originally, I believe, from Tivoli Gardens. There was some confusion about whether the order ought to have been signed at that time, since the man had an appeal pending to the Privy Council.
Yes, can I just deal with that aspect of it?
Yes.
Before you proceed further? The situation was that an extradition order had been made for Mr. Richard Morrison, generally known as Storyteller. He had applied to the full court for a writ of habeas corpus. That writ had been dismissed. At that time, there was no right of appeal to the Court of Appeal on a refusal of a writ. We have now taken steps to correct that. A document was filed by Mr. Morrison through his lawyers asking for leave to appeal. That document was misfiled, and the Deputy Director of the DPP certified to Mr. Rattray that no appeal was pending and that therefore there was no reason to stand in the way of signing the extradition order. Mr. Rattray proceeded to sign it accordingly. Mr. Rattray, in a statement to the House, which he gave immediately thereafter, frankly and rather generously admitted that had he known that any appeal had been filed, no matter how whimsical or flimsy, he would not have signed the extradition order. I say generously because since then the Privy Council, in a case known as the Crown against Walker, made it very clear that had the matter gone to them, they would not have entertained the appeal, since they regard themselves as a court to hear appeals from the Court of Appeal and not a court of first instance. But that, you may say, is a technical matter. Having regard to the circumstances in which the extradition order had been signed, the government of Jamaica felt they had an obligation to take all appropriate steps to ensure his release and his return to Jamaica. And we thereafter engaged the law firm of Holland and Knight in Miami to institute proceedings on our behalf to secure Mr. Morrison's return to Jamaica.
And those proceedings were unsuccessful.
Know that to fight those proceedings, it cost us some $5 million, which had to be paid out of the public purse.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the petition was dismissed and was not successful.
All right, sir.
I think you want to move on to another.
I want to move on to another aspect of the matter.
Yes.
It is my understanding that this man has not been tried in the United States and within the jurisdiction in the United States in relation to the crimes for which he was extradited.
That is my
allegation.
Also, Mr.
Okay. He has been tried somewhere else for another set of offenses.
That is correct.
And my understanding further is that the prosecutors have expressed an intention of not proceeding with the extraditable offenses.
I have heard something to that.
Okay. Now, what, may I ask you, sir, is the position of the government of Jamaica on that?
The government of Jamaica is of the view that if Mr. Morrison not tried for an offense for which he was extradited, it breaches what is called a rule of speciality, which is a fundamental provision of our extradition treaty. We are taking steps to ensure a confirmation of this, and I have given instructions to the Attorney General that working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and getting whatever information he can from the local and foreign lawyers who represented Mr. Morrison, a submission should be brought before the Cabinet outlining the situation so that the appropriate consideration can be given by the Cabinet as to what are the implications of this to the treaty which is presently in existence.
May I ask you this then? What happens in the meantime in relation to other pending extraditions? Does the government continue?
That is a matter which the Cabinet would have to consider very, very seriously. And I would say that before the Minister of National Security would sign any other extradition order that is pending, he would have to be absolutely satisfied that in no circumstances whatsoever would there be a repetition of the breach which occurred in the Morrison case. I should just say one thing, Mr. Perkins, which might not have come to your attention.
Yes.
Originally, there had been two separate applications for the extradition of Mr. Morrison. The first one, which was not proceeded with locally, is the offense for which he was tried. But that was not the basis on which he was extradited, because there was no proceedings in Jamaica to finality on that regard. For some reason, the Americans thought that Mr. Morrison had been extradited in respect of both requests, and that is the reason they urge as mitigating for having proceeded to try him on an offense for which he clearly was not extradited. But that is a matter which we have to pursue both through legal and diplomatic channels. One of the surprising things to me, Mr. Perkins, is that the lawyer who represented Mr. Morrison in the proceedings in Florida did not seem to take the point that Mr. Morrison was not properly before the court because he had not been extradited in respect of these offenses. But
that, I'm afraid, sir, is a point that the American courts are not going to take, because there's the Mexican case.
I must accept your observation in that regard, having taken note of what they did in regards to the case in Mexico.
Yes,
where they're saying once the person is before you, it doesn't matter how the person came there, we are going to exercise the jurisdiction to try that person. But as I must say, it has very, very clear adverse implications to the obligation under the extradition treaty, and those have to be pursued at both the legal and the diplomatic level.
So what you're now telling me, Prime Minister, is that you have had discussions with the Americans about it, and that the Americans have offered an explanation.
Exploratory discussions have taken place. They have not been finalized. We are not satisfied as to the explanations which have been offered, and we are pursuing the matter further.
Okay. Prime Minister, the matter of casino gambling has recently been in the news. The matter was discussed at your NEC meeting last week.
That is so.
And a decision was made?
Insofar as the party is concerned, yes.
Yes. And I take it that that means that, well, the persons who were pursuing this matter, they have indicated that they have no intention of going further with it. Oh.
Well, I think different ones of them have responded differently, but that's a matter for them.
Okay. May I ask you this? There has been no debate on this matter in Parliament.
Nobody has brought it to Parliament. There was a...
But somebody brought it to the NEC.
Yes, and anybody's free to bring it to Parliament. The government doesn't intend to bring it to Parliament because we find no reason for the position to be reviewed. But if the opposition wants to bring it to Parliament, they certainly are most welcome to do so.
The government is satisfied with the decision on the matter taken by the NEC.
The government's position, separate and apart from the decision of the NEC, was not in favor of casino gambling. This has been stated by the former Prime Minister, and in response to a question asked in my incumbency by Mr. Golding, the Minister of Finance, under whose portfolio the responsibility lay for betting, gaming and lotteries, confirmed that the government did not find any reason to modify its view.
Yeah, what's the difference?
If wants to have the matter ventilated, they only have to bring a resolution to Parliament, and we will afford them the necessary time.
What is the difference in principle between casino gambling and the forms of gambling of which the government clearly is in favor?
Let me say this, Mr. Perkins. The fact that smoking is injurious to health is well known. One does not ban the smoking of cigarettes. The more you smoke, of course, the greater is the risk of injury. It doesn't follow, however, that because the smoking of cigarettes is not prohibited by law, that the smoking of ganja should be legalized. There's a great big difference between the sort of gambling which takes place and which is permitted under the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Act from that which is contemplated by the grant of a casino license.
What's the difference?
No, let me tell you. Nobody travels from the United States or elsewhere to come to Jamaica to play slot machines or to indulge in betting in local horse racing. Casino gambling is something which is not incidental. It is something which is the center of promotion for those destinations in which casino gambling exists. And one has to be very, very careful, especially at this time. What is the image of the destination which we seek to promote?
So are you saying, Prime Minister, that if Caymanas Park should become eminently successful and the racehorse breeding industry in Jamaica become very successful too, and people come all over the world to attend race meetings at Caymanas, you consider banning it?
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
What do you say?
I am saying that casino gambling, unlike horse racing, is not incidental to anything. It is the centerpiece of something. In the case of
but
horse
Caymanas
racing,
Park would then be the centerpiece of the Jamaican attraction.
in the case of horse racing,
Yes.
there are many people who go to horse races not for the purpose of gambling, but for the spectacle of seeing horses run. I myself, I don't go to many horse races, but whenever it is being shown on television, I am an avid watcher of horse racing. Though I don't spend a single cent on betting on horse racing.
Are you opposed to gambling in principle?
A big difference between horse racing, sport, and casino gambling.
But people go to casinos to watch the shows, I'm told, at Las Vegas.
But you can have shows. You can have shows with spectacular entertainment. For example, Mr. Perkins, as a man of the world, you know that one of the best places of entertainment is in Paris, which is not attached at all to casino.
I don't know too much about it.
It's a spectacle that people from all over the world go to watch and enjoy.
But you're opposed to gambling.
These are not connected.
Are you opposed to gambling in principle?
No.
No.
I am not. I certainly, DJ Patterson is not opposed to gambling.
No, I'm talking about the government now.
The government is not opposed to gambling in principle.
The government is opposed to casino
The
gambling.
government is saying that at this present time, casino gambling is not a priority. And when one balances what might be brought in terms of income from casino gambling with other risks which are involved, it simply is not worth.
What are these risks, Prime Minister?
We are concerned about the levels of crime that are associated. We are very concerned in Jamaica at this present time about the question of money laundering. We are concerned about the social side effects of casino gambling, and we have to remind ourselves that money is not everything.
The social side effects of
We
casino.
have also to be concerned, and in the particular case of tourism, what is our image? What is the sort of destination which we are seeking to promote? In the marketplace at the present time, there are certain wrong perceptions and some element of distortion as to the incidence of crime and violence perpetrated against our visitors. We don't want to do anything to promote any activity that might further add to these misfortunes.
What's the level of crime and violence in Monaco?
And we don't want to make casino gambling the centerpiece of our strategy for the expansion of tourism or for attracting investments into Jamaica this time.
Could I ask you this, Prime Minister? The social side effects of the lotto and the scratch and win which went before it, you're not concerned about those?
We don't see that those are of the same magnitude as casino gambling.
But they're addressed, those are addressed to the poorest people in Jamaica.
Well, I don't know that the poorest people in Jamaica are engaged in the lotto, and I would imagine that the amount of money that is involved is, even for them, minuscule. I should also point out, Mr. Perkins, that this is one occasion when there seems to be some support from public opinion, because a poll was done by Don Anderson in July of 19.
He had the qualifications for the job.
That's correct.
Do you think that the appointment of a president of a court of appeal, a chief justice, any such appointment should be a matter of one man's thinking? Any one man should be able to do this?
Let me say this. Let us draw an analogy on which so many people like to rely. In the United States, it is not only the Chief Justice, but all members of the court, the Supreme Court, who are nominated by the President.
But that's a different thing.
Just 1 minute. It is my view that in the process of constitutional reform, the right to nominate the Chief Justice and the President should continue to rest in the Chief Executive, whether it be the Prime Minister or an Executive President were we to go that route. But that there ought to be some process of parliamentary hearing and parliamentary confirmation. And frankly, I was very disappointed that we did not have access to such a procedure in the case of Mr. Ratchey, because had it existed, he would more than have vindicated himself.
But don't you think you might have nonetheless put the matter before Parliament, even although you had no obligation to do so?
I didn't think that there was any necessity for it. Certainly, had we put the matter before Parliament, there would have been no doubt what the results would have been.
Okay, you on the subject of constitutional reform, Prime Minister, you clearly are thinking in terms of a separation of powers. President and a separately elected.
I have always favored that as the most desirable option, Mr. Perkins. As I have said before, in the nature of our Constitution, you cannot undertake fundamental reforms unless you are capable of getting the support of 2/3 of the membership of both houses, which includes the Senate. And for that reason, and that reason only, there has been a recognition by me that you can't force a situation where certainly the leader of the opposition has indicated he is not prepared to go along a certain course unless you are prepared to go the ultimate step of placing the matter before the people by way of a referendum.
Would you not go that far, Prime Minister? Why?
I am prepared to think of that, Mr. Perkins. I would not rule that out, but I feel that on the matter of constitutional reform, as that it can be a subject of national unity rather than national division, that is the preferable course.
Yes. You spoke recently about cabinet leaks, Prime Minister, and warned your ministers publicly in relation to this. It struck many of us as rather odd.
I don't know why it should, Mr. Perkins. As I said to a news briefing, it has been my practice whenever there are new members of a cabinet in place to remind all members that they have taken an oath by which we are all bound, and that a failure to obey that oath has serious consequences at two levels. First of all, the moment I have reason to believe that there has been any violation of the oath, I'll remove that person from the cabinet immediately. And secondly, it also has legal consequences because it could be the subject of police action.
Have you had any cause to be concerned about this recently?
I have had no evidence of leaks from the cabinet. I felt I had an obligation to advise not only cabinet ministers, but also ministers of state and parliamentary councils of the obligations of the oath which they all had to take.
But could you explain why you felt it necessary to do this publicly?
I didn't do it publicly. I did not do it publicly. I did it at a meeting of the Council of Ministers. At a press briefing I had, someone asked me whether in fact I had given such a warning, and I said yes, and I explained the reasons why I did.
Okay, Prime Minister, many people have a sense that institutions are decaying all around us. The schools, the hospitals, the roads, the security system, you name it. It is in decay. The Jamaica Government Railway, which used once to be a functioning institution, is virtually no more. Do you have a sense of this, of things falling apart?
Well, let me say this. On the social side, both in relation to our educational sector and our health sector, serious reforms are well underway, including institutional reform and the provision of the necessary physical facilities. You mentioned, Mr. Perkins, the police. And let me begin by saying, openly, the level of violence in our society is much too high, and we must work to reduce it. But
did politics contribute? Did politics?
There is one area in which this government has shown the courage and the willingness to undertake fundamental reform. It is in relation to the operations of our security forces, and that is evident to any person who is prepared to assess the situation objectively.
Are you speaking of the appointment of Colonel Macmillan?
Well, as a beginning, certainly yes, but it didn't stop there.
But one of the things that has happened, Prime Minister, is that Colonel Macmillan has attempted to implement a number of initiatives, and at every point he finds himself blocked.
I don't know that is true. First of all, the law has been amended to make it clear that the responsibility for operational command of the police force rests with Colonel Macmillan, and about that there can be no cause whatsoever of complaint. In terms of the transfers of police officers as a result of a ruling by a previous Attorney General in the 1960s, it had been suggested that the Commissioner of Police did not have that power relating to gazetted officers. We have had that ruling reconsidered, and it is very clear that he is entitled to exercise those powers, and he has been so advised and is in a position to implement them. Now, in terms of appointments to the police force, that is vested in the Police Services Commission, and it is a heavily entrenched section of the Constitution. In respect of the demotion or the firing of police officers, that is also a question of law and of the Constitution. And what the courts say is that if somebody is dismissed without proper cause, there is a breach of natural justice for which legal redress can be obtained. Now, we can't change that, and we wouldn't want to change that. The police commissioner is free and unfettered to exercise his responsibilities and discharge his duties in accordance with our laws and our constitution. And I, as Prime Minister, and his minister have given him every possible support in the execution of it.
Okay, further to the question I asked you about the decay of social amenities and institutions and utilities. The question of poverty. One has a sense of the country descending in deeper and deeper into poverty. Your minister, Portia Simpson, spoke recently about the growth of poverty and hopelessness in throughout the country. Is this your perception, that the people have a sense of becoming poorer and poorer? The country is.
Let me answer you in two parts. With the move to a market economy and with the adjustments that have had to be made to ensure that we are competitive, and with the decline which our dollar suffered, there is no doubt whatsoever that certainly in 1991 to 1992, the burden was very heavily felt among the poorest in our community. And also that for the first time, we had to begin to watch the creation of a new category of poor, those who were unemployed but poor. We feel, first of all, with the stability that has now been introduced into the economy, that trend should cease. And in fact, there's objective evidence that it has ceased. The last survey of living conditions establishes by figures that the disparity has ceased to grow wider, and indeed we are having a narrowing of the band. But in addition to that, we have to pursue programs that not only seek to cushion those who are presently at the poverty level, but also that seek to eradicate poverty by programs of training, by programs of human resource development, and by access to the sort of seed capital and the provision of amenities in particularly deprived communities that give these people a chance in life.
Prime Minister,
but that was one of the things on which the cabinet retreat devoted a great deal of attention. That is one of the factors that was very much at the center of my mind in the restructuring of the government. And during the course of the next budget presentation, you are going to see some of the practical ways in which we make the onslaught against poverty, which I think we must win.
Prime Minister, are you going to be able to win such an onslaught, any onslaught against poverty, without massive investment of a type that we have not seen in this country for a very long time?
We are going to need to attract massive investment. And
you said recently.
I would simply say this. The first thing that we had to do was to arrest the slide. That we have now done. And all the signs point to the fact that we are in a period of sustained economic growth from here on in. It is because of the importance of attracting investments why I appointed a Minister of Industry, Investments and Commerce. I added the word investments to emphasize the focus and the priority which we need to attach on this area. And when I speak about investments, I'm not only talking about external investments, I'm talking about local investment. And when I speak about local investment, I'm not only speaking about big local investment, I'm speaking about medium-sized and small business investment. And that is why, for the first time, all the small business development agencies and all micro enterprise development initiatives are concentrated under one single ministerial umbrella.
Prime Minister, you think the climate is right for investment now in Jamaica?
I would say it is not perfect, but it is certainly much better than it has been for many a year, and we have to keep on working to remove all the factors that are not conducive to investment, including a continued effort to reduce the bureaucracy, remove red tape, and expedite the time frame within which we take decisions to give final approval so that investments can proceed.
Good luck to you, Prime Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
And I hope that now that the ice is broken, you will come back.
I will return.
Okay, that brings us to the end of Straight Talk today. My gratitude to Michael Cuff for his generosity in allowing us some more time. We'll be back here with you tomorrow, usual time, 10:30. Look forward to your company. So long.